Hey guys, what's up? It's me, EDJ, and we're going to watch a new Extra History series, The First Crusade. I really love Extra History. I've been really high on them as of late, in case you couldn't tell. Um, Mainly because I really like how short their individual episodes are of series. Because if you notice, I like to binge watch. When we start a series, I binge watch it, usually in one sitting. Um, and I find that Extra History translates very well because the individual episodes are a bit shorter, so I'm able to just zoom through them much quicker, um, and get, series done for the most part. So I really love that about them. I also really do like the way they do break down history. I feel like, and I don't mean this like in a bad way, but like, okay, so like I think it's sort of like kiddish, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like they're amateur, they're not as good as other history YouTubers. I mean, like I feel like I could show this to a child and that they would get it, if that makes sense. Maybe it's just because of the drawings they do. It's very like, I guess kiddish. Like, I don't know what other word to use, and I don't even mean that as an insult, but I feel like the way they break things down in a much simpler, easier way to get grasp, and accompanied by their more childish, friendly animations is really good. I hope no one takes offense to that. I don't mean like childish, like in a bad way, or that, oh, this is kid stuff. Like, I just feel like I could like show this to children, and they would probably get it much easier than if I showed them like something else. Like, I don't know. Yeah, but something that's an aspect I really like about Extra History, and I do feel like I really do like the way they break things down, and that I always get what they say, and I always have a different perspective when I watch these series. Like the last one we saw, Saladin, it changed the way I viewed Saladin, but for the better, I think, and really helped me see the man as more multifaceted than I think I did before. So, I don't know. Either way, I really love this guy, or these guys. I'm not sure about the whole background of Extra History, how many people are working for it or not, but either way, I really love this channel. And so yeah, we're going to be looking at the Crusades. We've kind of been in the medieval era this year, haven't we, a lot? Which is good, because I really do love the medieval era. It's personally my favorite period of history, so this has been very fun to go through. And, yeah. So, without any further ado, we should really just get into it. I'm just rambling now. Let's watch Extra Histories, The First Crusade, Part 1, The People's Crusade.
The year is 1095 CE. We stand at the Council of Clermont. In the audience are all the great names of Europe, secular and ecclesiastic. For a moment, there's a hush. The last words of Pope Urban II's fiery speech extolling nations of Christendom to retake the Holy Land from Muslim invaders hangs in the air. Then someone in the crowd shouts, "Deus vult! God wills it!" The chant is picked up by man after...
Yes, Deus Vult. It's kind of like a big meme. You see, I'm reminded of all the Crusader memes and video memes I've seen about the Crusades, and then, you'll see comments and videos about Deus Vult. It's like, it's obviously the word most associated with the Crusades, and I just think of all the memes about it, and I really like it. So, but yeah, it is a very interesting whole event.
man until the council rings with deafening shouts of Deus vult. Then, out of the crowd, a bishop named Ademar rushes up and falls to his knees before the Pope, proclaiming that he will lead any willing Christian to reclaim the Holy Land for Christ. And thus, the First Crusade began. There's just a few problems. You see, by this point, Muslims had actually occupied the Holy Land for nearly 400 years, and there was little evidence of the various atrocities Urban invoked in his speech to incite Europe to crusade. In fact, the Church had never seemed very concerned about the occupation before now, and pilgrimages to the Holy Land had continued practically uninterrupted since Jerusalem fell into Muslim hands in 637. So what was really going on? Well, earlier that year, Alexius Comnenus, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, an empire that had fallen a long way since the days of Justinian, had sent envoys to the Pope asking for help from the west against the Seljuk Turks. These Turkish Muslims coming out of the east had practically pushed the empire to its limits, forcing them out of nearly all of Anatolia, the traditional heartland of his empire. Alexius Comnenus had hoped for supplies, arms, and a few thousand well-trained men so that Byzantium could continue to serve as the bulwark of Christian Europe against the Muslim East. Or really so he could just win this war, retake his territory, and strengthen the empire he was the head of, but, it's all in how you sell it. Well, Pope Urban had a slightly different idea. You see, the Pope wasn't in the most secure position. The Church was basically at war with the Holy Roman Emperor. Another Pope named Clement III had been installed in Ravenna, and claimed to be the rightful Pope. In fact, Urban...
Yeah, the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope, we've seen through history when kings and monarchs start beefing with the Pope or the papacy, and the Holy Roman Empire, which is neither holy nor Roman or an empire, there were some divisions. I think of the oversimplified telling. Obviously this dynamic between the Pope and kings, it's a very interesting one, really. Even the Pope himself just had so much power. Honestly, there's so much to the popes. There have even been some really wild popes in history. There have been the Pope Wars. There's a lot to it, to be honest. And, I believe he said he'd set up, another pope while Urban's still around, so it's like this really weird situation, honestly.
Couldn't even enter Rome, hence why he was kicking around in France, because the Holy Roman Emperor and the Antipope held it against him. So Urban thought, maybe let's unite all of Christendom to fight somebody else. Of course, he never really asked for...
Obviously... It's interesting when we see this conflict, the Holy War. Obviously, it's always just portrayed as, okay, we are Christian, and we are going to defeat Islam. And while that is an aspect, there's a lot of secular aspects to these wars, some type of material gain, some type of strategic gain. Obviously there's more to it than just religion, even though religion's kind of the face of it. It is interesting because sometimes these things can help benefit in other situations, so in a sense kind of using religion to accomplish other things, while also obviously accomplishing religion. Some people kind of have a very cynical view towards the Crusades. There's a lot to it. I'm not gonna go too deep into it because there's a lot to it, but it really is just an interesting all the Crusades are just so interesting, and there's so much discussion and debate and perspective, and I think that's just because you throw in the religious aspects, and religion is a big hot topic among people, right up there with politics. Well, maybe not as up there with politics, but it is important. It's like you kind of have to watch your words carefully because, there's a lot to it.
For Alexius Comnenus' opinion on this plan, but we'll deal with that more later. And thus, the First Crusade began. But Urban was a smart guy. He knew how to motivate people. He knew how to gather a force larger and more cohesive than any nation in Europe could muster. He would offer to those who had spent their life fighting, those who had spent their lives committing mortal sins.
Yeah, I think he's about to talk about the indulgences, which gave absolutism, absolution, from, and sort of like, there's a lot to indulgences, to be honest, but that is an aspect of it, and, help fight in the Crusades, helps get into heaven, obviously. There's a lot to it, and, for those of you, I've said it previously a few times, I am Christian, and, I've had a really weird religious history, just to show you, because I keep bringing it up, and, I don't really like talking about religion on this channel because well, I just want to show my credential, I guess. I went to Bible college. I have my bachelor's here for theology. So obviously I do know a lot about this stuff, but I don't talk about it on this channel. I talk about, if you can see the side, I don't know which side it's on, but you can see my social media handles here. And you can see my other YouTube channel. Its full name is Edwin de Jesus. On that channel I talk about religion a lot. And you know, on this channel, I made this channel to talk about secular history. But the problem is, when we're watching stuff like the Crusades, religion inevitably gets involved, and then I'm like, I would like to go off, but I can't because I refrain. I save that side for myself on the other channel. So there's a lot to it, and obviously in terms of indulgences, or you know, later on buying your way into heaven where you could just pay to have your sins absolved, obviously it's a differing of things, like you know, that's Catholicism, and I'm a Christian, but I'm a Pentecostal apostolic Christian. You know, even among Christianity, you know, there's a lot of leeway. There's a lot of differences, and obviously, like I said, if I were to just start talking, you know, that there'd be issues. So like I said, sometimes I get nervous when these things are, so I'm just gonna refrain from talking much. But obviously indulgences, and a lot to them, there's a lot of opinions and thoughts I have about it that I won't ever share, at least not on this channel. So I'll refrain, you know.
One chance, one opportunity for absolution, and he would offer that opportunity for doing the thing they did best, going to war. This is the first time a pope had ever done this. Never before had a plenary indulgence been offered for martial action, and this innovation drew a lot of people. And truth is, though I may have my suspicions about some of the motivations of the leaders of this movement, in a world as motivated by faith as medieval Europe, I think that faith and a hope for absolution was the reason that so many people
Yeah, there's a saying I heard many years ago, that the medieval period, people were really obsessed with death and looking towards the afterlife. I forgot the context I heard that from, but obviously religion played a huge part, and there was the idea, you know, if your life sucks in this one, don't worry guys, look towards the next life when you've passed on. So, you know, religion obviously, it's not the same nowadays. More people are, I feel, not religious or not heavy in practicing their religion. You know, I know plenty of people who claim to be Christians but don't read the Bible or go to church or hardly pray, so that there's a lot of aspects there. And you know, I would say nowadays probably there's a lot less, at least I think compared to medieval Europe, society as a whole ain't as big on religion and motivated by it. And obviously there's the whole idea of separation of church and state, and back in the medieval times, and even back then, like, popes had way more power, I think, you know, could basically lead whole armies, which was wild. You know, there's a lot to it, and obviously people operating in the mindset that I've just stated, hear this and are like, heck yeah, let's go fight, get into heaven easier. You know, obviously there's religion, zeal and zealousness play a huge part in, you know, these wars when you make it about God, which might be one of the greatest motivators for war, when you make something religious, you know, and more people willing to die and do whatever it takes, you know, because at this point it's for God, and it's for a person's eternal standing once this life has passed. So yeah,
corrupted themselves just so they could join the Crusade. But, unfortunately, this offer was so good that a lot of people who signed up weren't quite the people the Pope meant to get. You see, the Pope had set a date of August 1096 for the Crusaders to leave from Europe, so that knights and barons could get their affairs in order, and so that they could prepare what, in the Middle Ages, counted as supply and logistics. But that wasn't fast enough for some people. In France, there was a fellow by the name of Peter the Hermit, who began whipping up the peasantry. He talked of the atrocities he'd witnessed in the Holy Land, although there's a fair amount of evidence to say that he never actually went there, and he told tales of his divine appointment by Christ to lead the spiritually pure who would be protected by heaven to Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of people left their farms to join Peter, although they had no money for the journey and didn't even know how far it was from their homes in Western Europe to the Levant. Few of them were soldiers, and fewer still even owned weapons. But as Peter preached, word of this peasant crusade began. And while Peter was still gathering his tide of peasants at Cologne, other groups decided that they were just going to set out on their own. And this is where the People's Crusade becomes one of the most unmitigated messes in the history of history. First, there's the group from France under a fellow named Walter Sannevoix. They left ahead of Peter and made it through Hungary all right, but when they showed up at Belgrade, the doorstep of the Byzantine Empire, the local governor was very confused. He'd been told that the Crusaders weren't supposed to show up for another half a year at least. And weren't they supposed to be soldiers? This was just a mob led by a few impoverished knights. So, he didn't let them in. He told them he was going to send a letter back to Constantinople, and could they please just wait patiently until he got his instructions in order? How did they respond? By pillaging the countryside. In all fairness to the Crusaders, they were probably starving. They hadn't thought to bring many supplies with them, and you've got to remember, this is spring in medieval Europe. It's not like they had refrigeration and rapid transport. The bulk of the food for the year comes in during the fall harvest, which is exactly why Urban scheduled his crusade to start in the middle of August, so it could be easy to resupply as they went. But by springtime, there's just not very much food around, so it's unlikely the Crusaders had been able to really stock up on spare provisions on their trek through Hungary. So the Crusaders went on a pillaging spree. They destroyed homes and farms. They even came to blows with the local Byzantine garrison. Some of them even went back to Hungary, which they'd managed to cross through before without doing any harm, and tried to loot a local market. They tried, but the townsfolk kicked them out, and the local Byzantine garrison beat them down too. And soon, cowed, these first Crusaders were brought under escort to Constantinople. We'll catch up with them in a bit when Peter gets there. But first we should talk about the second splinter group of the People's Crusade, a group from Germany led by Count Emicho of Leiningen. This count had heard of Peter's preachings, and had gathered his own group to go crusade. They were to head off to the Holy Land from Germany, but, well, they only got a few miles before they seemed to decide that, the local Jews are a lot closer, and less well-armed. And so they went from town to town through Germany, sacking their own cities, slaughtering the Jewish population, and stealing any money they might find. Now, this was opposed almost unilaterally by the Catholic Church. This wasn't...
Yeah, I was gonna say, not the first time that the Romans, aka Byzantines, got screwed over by Crusaders, or being messed with them. Yeah, obviously, some people would look at the Crusades, would be like, pointed as kind of an example of, Christianity bad, or religion bad, because of the things, some of the less savory acts committed by, people working under the banner of the Crusades. And, the Crusaders didn't have their hands clean, obviously. I think we can all agree on that in certain instances throughout the Crusades. Boy, anti-Semitism is like such a thing, in just history and the world, and it's insane. Like, honestly. I mean, I don't know about you guys who watch my channel. I don't hate the Jews. I actually really do love the Jewish people, and obviously there's a lot of biblical aspects to them, like being God's chosen people, etc. They've been through it, guys. The Jewish people have been through it. And I think I should stop talking now, because obviously this is still a hot topic, especially with the current issues with, Israel and Palestine, and, obviously that's been a cause of much discussion, but, yeah, there's a lot to it, man. But these people didn't deserve that,
at all what Urban had called for. Even if you argue he didn't care about Jews, there's no question he wanted the fighting out of Christendom at the very least. Not only did priests and monks preach against this sort of violence, but there are actually heroic stories of bishops opposing these marauding crusaders and trying to protect their local Jewish communities. The Bishop of Speyer gave them his protection. The Bishop of Worms brought the local Jews to take refuge in his home and even tried to fortify the place. But the Christian crusaders attacked and stormed the bishop's house, slaughtering some 800 Jews hiding there.
Goodness.
The Bishop of Mainz did the same, and even ordered the town barred against the crusaders. In fact, there, the local Jewish population even raised a great deal of gold to give Emiko if he would just go away. But Emiko took the bribe, and then attacked the city anyway. When word of the attack reached him, the bishop raised his personal guard and rushed to join forces with the governor's militia and a force of local burgesses, who had come out armed to defend the local Jewish population. After fierce fighting, the locals drove the crusaders off, but the crusaders gathered more men, recruited some sympathetic or bribable townsfolk, and attacked again. This time, the defenders broke and fled. In the aftermath, thousands of Jews were slaughtered. Emiko's band massacred their way through Germany until at last, they ended up at the Hungarian border. By this time, Peter and his crusade had already passed through Hungary. We'll talk about how their trip went next time. But when the King of Hungary saw Emiko's marauding band, he decided that nope, he was having none of this, and refused to let them into his country. The Crusaders decided to force their way in anyway, and promptly laid siege to the Hungarian Christian city of Moson, where they were promptly defeated by the city garrison and slaughtered almost to a man. And thus, the First Crusade began. Join us next time to find out what.
Yeah, that's quite the start, and we've got plenty more to go through. So, yeah, I'm gonna jump to the next video, guys. These videos worry me sometimes because, like, you know what? Let's just jump to the next video, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everyone.